The air in the Scottish Highlands didn't just bite, it chewed through bone. Elias Thorne stood on the edge of a jagged cliff overlooking the mist-covered valley of Glencoe. 10 years ago, this land had echoed with the screams of his family. Today, it was silent, save for the whistling wind that carried the scent of upcoming rain and old blood. Elias wasn't the scrawny, terrified boy who had fled into the woods a decade ago. His hands were calloused from years of hard labor in the docks of Marseille, and his mind was sharpened by the ruthless underground circles of Eastern Europe. He had returned not as a victim, but as a reckoning, the architect of ruin. His target was Marcus Sterling, a billionaire developer whose face was currently plastered on every billboard in London. Sterling was the man who had orchestrated the accidental fire that claimed Elias's family estate, all to clear the path for a luxury mountain resort. Sterling hadn't just stolen Elias's inheritance, he had stolen his soul. Elias pulled a scorched silver pocket watch from his coat. It had belonged to his father. The glass was cracked, but the gears still turned, a reminder that time eventually runs out for everyone. 2 days later, the scene shifted from the silent highlands to the thundering pulse of London's financial district. Elias had assumed a new identity, Arthur Vance, a mysterious private investor with a penchant for distressed assets. He didn't go for Sterling directly. A predator knows that attacking the head of the pride is suicide. You must first bleed the lieutenants. His first target was Julian Vane, Sterling's chief financial officer. Vane was a man of expensive tastes and even more expensive secrets. He spent his weekends at an underground high-stakes poker club in Soho, gambling away money that wasn't strictly his. "Check," Vane said, his forehead beaded with sweat. He was losing.
Badly.
"I'll raise you," Elias said, his voice a calm, low baritone. He pushed a stack of chips worth £50,000 into the center. "And I'll raise you one more thing, Mr. Vane." Elias slid a small, unmarked envelope across the table. Vane opened it. His face turned a ghostly shade of gray. Inside were high-resolution photos of Vane meeting with a rival firm CEO, evidence of corporate espionage that would see him imprisoned for decades. "Who are you?" Vane whispered, his hands trembling. "A ghost," Elias replied. "And I have a proposition. You can either go to prison tonight, or you can help me dismantle Marcus Sterling's empire brick by brick." By dawn, Elias had what he needed, the encrypted access codes to Sterling's private offshore accounts. But Elias didn't want the money. He wanted the chaos that losing the money would cause. Back in his dimly lit apartment overlooking the Thames, Elias began his work. He didn't just transfer the funds, he redirected them. He sent millions of pounds from Sterling's accounts to various environmental charities and local Scottish heritage funds, the very organizations Sterling had been fighting for years. Then, he sent a single email to every major news outlet in the UK. The subject line, "The Sterling Fraud, the truth behind Glencoe." Attached were the original blueprints of the resort, proving that Sterling knew the land was a protected heritage site and had bribed officials to bypass the law. The reaction. At 8 a.m., the London Stock Exchange opened. By 8:15 a.m., Sterling Holdings stock was in freefall. In his glass-walled penthouse, Marcus Sterling watched the news in horror. His phone was ringing off the hook. His lawyers were frantic. His reputation, built over 30 years, was dissolving in 30 minutes. "Find out who did this," Sterling roared, shattering a crystal glass against the wall. "I want them found and erased." The fallout was immediate. By noon, the Sterling fraud was trending across Europe. In the corridors of power in Brussels and the financial hubs of Frankfurt, the name Marcus Sterling was becoming toxic. But as the world watched the digital collapse, a more physical threat was mobilizing in the shadows of London. The cleaner. In a windowless room beneath a high-end Mayfair tailor shop, Marcus Sterling sat across from a man known only as the Kestrel. The Kestrel didn't have a name, a passport, or a conscience. He was a specialist in erasure. "I don't care about the money," Sterling hissed, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and fear. "I want the person who did this. They're using my own internal codes. It's an inside job or someone very close to my past." The Kestrel looked at the grainy CCTV footage Elias had intentionally left behind, a shadowed figure in a dark trench coat. "He's not a hacker," the Kestrel remarked, his voice like grinding gravel. "He's a soldier. Look at the way he moves, minimalist, calculated. This is personal, Marcus. Who did you leave alive 10 years ago?" Sterling's eyes widened.
Impossible.
"They all died in Glencoe." "Clearly," the Kestrel said, standing up, "someone didn't stay dead. The Highland trap." Elias knew the cleaners would be deployed. He had already left London. He didn't head for the airports or the train stations. Those were too easy to monitor. Instead, he took a rugged 4x4 and drove north, back toward the jagged peaks of the Scottish Highlands. He wasn't running away. He was leading them to his home turf. Elias arrived at the ruins of his family estate, Thorn Manor, under the cover of a torrential downpour. The blackened stones of the foundation were overgrown with moss and heather, looking like a graveyard of memories. He spent the night rigging the perimeter. He didn't use high-tech sensors, he used the land. Thin wires hidden in the tall grass, bells muffled by wool, and the natural echoes of the valley. He sat in the center of the ruins, cleaning his father's old hunting rifle. The cold didn't bother him anymore. The cold was an old friend. The confrontation. At 3 a.m., the silence of the glen was broken by the faint hum of a drone. Elias didn't look up. He knew the Kestrel was close. Suddenly, a red laser danced across the charred stone inches from Elias's head. He rolled behind a pillar just as a silenced bullet hissed through the air. "Elias Thorne," a voice boomed through a megaphone, echoing off the mountains. "You should have stayed in the shadows. Sterling offers you a deal. Return the access keys, and I make your death quick." Elias didn't respond with words. He pulled a small remote from his pocket and pressed it. A series of flashbangs ignited around the perimeter, blinding the two mercenaries following the Kestrel. In the confusion, Elias moved like a wraith. He knew every loose stone, every hidden dip in the ground. He appeared behind the first mercenary, his movements a blur of practiced violence. A quick strike to the throat, a twist of the arm. The man was down before he could scream. The second man fired wildly into the mist, but Elias was already gone, melting back into the darkness of the ruins. The Kestrel, however, was different. He was a professional. He stayed low, moving toward the center of the manor. He found Elias standing near the old fireplace, the only part of the house still standing. "You're good," the Kestrel said, his pistol aimed at Elias's chest. "But you're driven by emotion. That makes you predictable. Is that what you told my father before you set the fire?" Elias asked, his voice steady. The Kestrel paused, a cold smirk forming on his lips. "I didn't set the fire, kid. I was there to save the documents. Your father wasn't just an accountant. He was a silent partner. Sterling didn't kill him for a resort. He killed him because your father wanted to go legit and take the whole company with him." Elias felt a surge of cold fire in his chest. His father wasn't just a victim. He was a player who tried to change the game. This wasn't just about a stolen home. It was a betrayal of brotherhood. "Drop the gun," the Kestrel commanded. Instead, Elias kicked a hidden lever in the floorboards. A heavy iron grate, once used for the manor's cellar, swung shut between them. "I don't need to kill you yet," Elias said through the bars. "I need you to send a message to Marcus. Tell him the ghost of Glencoe isn't just coming for his money. I'm coming for his legacy." Elias threw a smoke canister, and by the time the air cleared, he was gone. The final move of the night. While the Kestrel was trapped in the ruins, Elias's pre-programmed virus hit the final stage. Across every digital billboard in London's Piccadilly Circus, a video began to play. It wasn't a leak of documents. It was a recording from 10 years ago, a hidden camera in the Thorn Manor study. It showed Marcus Sterling holding a lighter, looking at Elias's father. "Sorry, old friend," Sterling's voice echoed through the speakers in the heart of London. "But there's no room for a conscience in this business." The evidence was no longer just financial. It was a confession of murder. The Mediterranean sun was blinding, reflecting off the turquoise waters of Monaco. But for Marcus Sterling, the warmth was an illusion. He was trapped on his 200-foot superyacht, the Midas, anchored 3 miles offshore to avoid the reach of Interpol and the British authorities. He was safe, or so he thought. The stowaway. Among the 24 crew members on the Midas, there was a new deckhand named Lucas. With a buzz cut, a fake tan, and a silent demeanor, Elias Thorne had bypassed the yacht's elite security screening using a deep-fake digital profile. He had spent the last 48 hours cleaning teak decks and polishing brass, all while mapping the ship's internal security system. Elias knew that killing Sterling on the yacht was easy, but he didn't want a quick death. He wanted Sterling to watch his world shrink until there was nothing left but the ocean. The Kestrel's return. However, Elias wasn't the only ghost on the ship. The Kestrel had survived the Highlands. He sat in the bridge of the yacht, his eyes fixed on the internal security monitors. His pride was wounded, and a wounded predator is twice as dangerous. "He's here, Marcus," the Kestrel said, his voice a low hiss. "I can feel him. He's in the walls. He's in the shadows." "Then find him," Sterling screamed, pacing the mahogany floor of his cabin. "I'm paying you millions to protect me, not to give me weather reports." The digital siege. That night, as a gala for elite European arms dealers took place on the main deck, a desperate attempt by Sterling to find new investors to save his crumbling empire, Elias struck. He didn't use a gun. He used the ship's own luxury. From the engine room, Elias plugged his modified tablet into the yacht's central server. Suddenly, the lights on the deck began to flicker in a rhythmic, haunting pattern. The upbeat jazz music died, replaced by a low, distorted recording of a crackling fire. The elite guests went silent. On the giant cinema screen by the infinity pool, an image appeared, the charred ruins of Thorne Manor. "What is this?" a French senator whispered, clutching her glass. Then a voice boomed over the speakers, Elias's voice, cold and echoing. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are dining with a murderer. Look at your host. Look at the man who burns families for profit." Panic erupted. The guests scrambled for the lifeboats. Sterling tried to stop them, but the fear of being associated with the wanted murderer was stronger than his influence. In the chaos, Elias moved toward the master suite. He bypassed 2 guards with swift, silent strikes, leaving them unconscious in the narrow corridor. He burst into the room. Sterling was there, clutching a briefcase full of diamonds and a burner phone. "It ends here, Marcus," Elias said, tossing his deckhand cap aside. "You think you've won?" Sterling laughed hysterically. "The Kestrel is right behind you." Elias didn't turn around. He dropped to the floor just as a combat knife whistled through the air where his head had been. The Kestrel stepped out from behind a velvet curtain, a suppressed pistol in his hand. "I told you, kid," the Kestrel said. "Emotion makes you predictable."